everyone. This is Dave Warner with Trailway Tales on the Studio 25 Podcast Network. And we've got a big dog in here today. We've got Paul Steely White. He's the Executive Director of Parks and Trails New York. And he's here in the studio instead of being off in Albany, right? Is where you're out of?
Well, yeah, most days I'm in Albany. I live in the Hudson Valley with my lovely wife, Zoe, and our 3 children. And we moved there from Brooklyn, I guess, like a lot of people during the pandemic, and really discovered the splendors of upstate New York. And so now I'm very lucky to be a leading evangelist for all of the natural assets we have here in the great state of New York.
So tell me specifically, Executive Director of Parks and Trails New York, what does that mean? What is your job?
Well, Parks and Trails New York is a venerable institution that's been around for 40 years. And my predecessors were just incredibly successful in creating what we have today, certainly in the Empire State Trail. You know, a lot of folks like me who are relative newcomers to the upstate, natural network, it's been a discovery for me to understand that these people were toiling for years, for decades, to get the Empire State Trail to a state where it is now, where you can ride your bike from Buffalo to Albany, virtually carb-free, right? Without danger, without stress. And it's that experience that we're trying to replicate all over the state, right? So we have not just the Empire State Trail, but a network of greenways throughout the state. Many of them former, rail corridors, but also power line corridors, other rights of way. That are not just a recreational asset, but also the sort of backbone of these local networks that we're starting to see. And it's very similar to my work in Manhattan and in New York City, where we had the Hudson River Greenway, which is part of the Empire State Trail that goes along the western edge of Manhattan. Yeah. And for so long, that was the only place that any sane person would ride their bike in New York City.
Why was that? Just because of the traffic or?
Traffic, danger. There were no bike lanes anywhere else. And so slowly we started to build off of that spine, right? So people could, ride their bikes to the Greenway and back again. And then we started to work with some Danish designers from Copenhagen to get the first really well-designed protected bike lanes in Manhattan and in Brooklyn. And today, as we know, New York is a biking city. We have bike share. We have more and more folks not choosing to take their car or hassle with the transit system and just, under your own power, you're independent. But even for folks who don't bike, biking is sort of a leading sort of indicator species of the health of a city in a way, right? Do you have sufficient safety and connectivity and access to the outdoors? Another one of the things I worked on during my time in New York City, prior to joining Parks and Trails, I was the Executive Director of Transportation Alternatives, a wonderful organization that had a car-free Central Park campaign, because you could go to Central Park to escape the cacophony of the city and the pollution, and then there were cars in Central Park, so we had this wonderful campaign to get the cars out of Central Park, and it took too long, but it was a real emblematic campaign for forging a more livable city and giving people better access to nature. And so at Parks and Trails, we're trying to do that statewide, right? And so we have the Empire State Trail, we have the state park system. We don't have great national parks in New York State like they do out west, right? That's because our forebears founded the state park system in many ways sort of prior to many of the national parks we now enjoy. And so those are all under state control, so we have Letchworth, right, for example. We have Minnewaska State Park, which is near me in the Hudson Valley. And these places are really rival Rocky Mountain National Park or Yosemite, certainly in terms of their natural beauty, but also just in terms of how they're cared for. And so Parks and Trails New York is really trying to take this wonderful system of state parks and increasingly connected greenway trails and make them even better, and give everyone in New York State easy, comfortable, convenient, everyday access to natural areas, natural experiences, because there's so much research now. This is what we need as human beings, right? We need to hear birds chirping. We need to see green. We need to get out and move our bodies. And that's what people want. That's what the market wants. If you look at what happened in Syracuse recently, economic development, right? Everyone's talking about it, especially in the Rust Belt of New York State.
Yeah, you're in the spot. You're in a spot where we talk about this a lot.
And I was talking to the county executive, McMahon, in Onondaga County, where Syracuse is. And the big news there, of course, is the Micron investment, right? $100 billion investment. And he said a big reason why they chose to locate in Syracuse was because of the natural assets that they have, the parks, the Empire State Trail, because their workforce wants that quality of life.
I was involved in a lot of economic development on that side of it. And tech workers, you think of nerds and in front of computers and sleeping under desks and whatever. And that's what my guys did. But anyway, but one of the things they wanted was access to arts and culture. They wanted to be able to sit outside at an experience at a coffee shop, ride a bicycle, be on a trail, go to a park. And that was from a National Conference of Governors study that looked at that and said, this is one of the things. So if you want to draw high tech to a community, you focus on these kinds of things. And a lot of people were going, arts and culture, but trails, bicycles, what are you talking about? These are nerds. That's what they want.
Yeah.
And so they knew what they were looking for. They knew what the people that they wanted to draw there wanted, and that played into it. And I read a study a couple of days ago that was talking about people taking these things and saying, I need to get away. And they're wanting to go outside. They're wanting that
unplug.
Hear the birds. They want to unplug. Not just the young people, but a lot of people are turning towards that. So when you have a community here or any of them along the trail, Empire State Trail, that have water and parks and things like that, it's like, okay, here's a reason to be here. Here's a reason to be in Little Falls, for instance. 2 bodies of water going through the center, the Empire State Trail right here, tons of parks. So it plays into what you're talking about as well.
Perfect, exactly. And I see Little Falls.
I'm not going for your job.
No. I mean, well put. Well, very well put. I couldn't put it better myself, Dave. Thank you. And I have to
$20.
And I have to confess, this is only my second visit to Little Falls, and it's marvelous what you have here. And I feel like the sort of challenge of Little Falls is in many ways the challenge of a lot of similar communities that are trying to figure it out. And working with what they have, and what you have here is that quality of life, it is that access to nature, that local adventure. And really, I think being nestled here in this, little valley, it's like this, you don't have the sprawl, I think,
right.
And so all the services
you'd be hanging to the side of a cliff if you were going to sprawl.
But we were discussing last night over dinner, that lovely dinner we had, how everything you need is sort of right here, right? So it's all accessible. There's a lot of talk in urban planning circles about trying to create, the 15-minute city, where everything you need is within a decent walk or a bike ride.
And you don't have to create that. That actually exists.
Right.
Here. As I went down through the list last night of the amenities that we have.
Is there another community anywhere that with the population you have with that same wealth of amenities?
I think even larger populations. I mean, when you come to things like bowling alleys, how many bowling alleys are left, right? How many cinemas are left?
Yeah.
When you get away from a big city? How many hospitals?
Yeah.
So when you start ticking off those things, the only thing we get to, one of the big things that we get to that we're missing that we think would be transformational is a train station. We had one before. It was right here.
Yeah.
You're in Canal Place right now. You're literally 100 yards away from where the train station used to be. So there's a study being done. We're looking at it. And if you think about it, people wanting to escape the city, for instance, and come to a diamond in the rough community that has everything that's walkable. And as we move forward and make it more cycling friendly, with a train station, we'd be the perfect spot.
Oh, that rail access is so key. As we were preparing for this journey, right, the group, the merry band that I'm a part of, biking from Albany here through the Mohawk Valley, on our way west, we were convening at the Albany Rensselaer Amtrak station, and I was meeting folks who were coming up from the city on the train to start this journey, and I was just surprised to see how many people were there at the station with cycling gear, with their bikes. Many of them were taking the train to Buffalo and then riding back east and doing that way. But for people wanting to experience that, splendor, that adventure, that discovery, to be able to come up on the train, make it convenient, make it a lovely experience. I think you hit on it, right? That kind of access is so key to opening it up.
Is.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that they might want to go to the endpoints like Albany or Buffalo, right?
Yeah.
But you could bring them here. And even when we were talking a little bit last night about, work and trying to build industry is not going to come back. People have been waiting for that to happen here for 50 years.
Yeah.
And guess what? It's not happening. But remote work and things like that, even though everybody's saying kind of get back into the buildings and whatever, there's still a component of people that can remote work. And so we have facilities here for that. So they could take the train, they could, work in the city, come up here, live here on the weekends, or vice. There's a lot of different ways to mix that. So, and the cycling is important. It really is.
I was talking this morning over my first coffee. This is my second coffee.
Oh yeah, no wonder you're a little wired.
One of my friends who's on the trip, who you had a chance to meet last night, Mark Gorton, who's a very successful entrepreneur and has been in the tech community for a long time. FinTech and information and so forth. And he's a city guy. He's
talking to him, I could tell.
Yep. And he's never been upstate really, and he's blown away. Yeah. He's just like, how do we help? How do we get people to discover how wonderful this is? And he talked about the train as you did. But also there are small sort of boutique adventure tourism operations. There's one, my friend Joe, who's in Brooklyn. It's called 718 Cyclery, and he takes small groups of folks up on the Empire State Trail. And I feel like that's like a big part of the next step, right? It's just like getting people to understand that you don't have to go to Europe for a lovely vacation. We have this world-class recreation right here in our backyard in New York State.
And we do have some of those groups, I think Bike America and groups like that kind of, because I see their vans here, and I've talked to some of the riders every once in a while about staying here and stuff. I mean, we do have, thank God for the Airbnb kind of movement, because that has created a lot more lodging for us. We had a real problem with lodging. We had a Best Western, then it was a Travel Lodge, now it's a Roadway Inn, and they've been doing a lot of internal cleanup on it to make it go to the next level, right? So they're trying to improve the quality of the stay here.
Yeah, that's lovely. Dave, if you don't mind, I want to pivot just for a sec to the sort of political challenge that we face, because a big part of what we do at Parks and Trails New York is try to organize an effective coalition of stakeholders who can impress upon the governor and the legislature that this is our best chance at vibrant, reinvested communities, right? And that doubling down on the recreational economy, making sure there's adequate funding for our state and municipal parks,
right? The
bridges, the trails, all of that infrastructure that's so necessary to give people the experience that they want. And we're doing more.
The governor's a boater. She
I think she gets it. She totally gets
canal,
it.
Right?
And this new budget, this new state budget that we have, has more money for parks in it, more money for trail expansion, which I think is stark considering, where we're at right now, with the federal government cutting funding for a lot of these vital services and public amenities. And so I think we have to keep that going, right? And so we're busy trying to document not just the tourism dollars that are coming to communities who are doing it right, but also, again, that future investment of companies choosing to locate here, talented people who could work from anywhere, digital nomads, et cetera, wanting to be here. And so the coalition that we're building includes visionary mayors like we have here in Little Falls. Mm-hmm. And certainly what I like to call the Parks Industrial Complex, all of the businesses who are on our side, the design, engineering, and construction firms that are doing the work, the cutting edge, tech firms who, again, want their workforce to be happy, and so thank you for being a beacon for us to point to and say, hey, there are local elected officials, local, media leaders, et cetera, who really get it. And at Parks and Trails, we're trying to build a community, a stronger community where we can go to Albany and say, this is what we want.
I think sometimes we, and I'm talking about my side of it, do a poor job of explaining it to people, making it clear, making that connection clear. I think we might have talked about it a little bit last night where I said, there's 500,000 people that look at My Little Falls Now, the Daily Post, in a year. There's 5,000 people in Little Falls, so it's got to reach, right?
Yeah.
And we're telling all these great stories about what's happening here, but somehow we're not conveying the opportunity, right, for new businesses or the amenities, or not telling that story about that walkable community, which all the people who've grown up here, they never thought about walkable. It just was.
Yeah.
That was their life. And when you talk to the older people, they walked everywhere.
Sure.
Today, the kids get a bus or their parents drive them to school. And I don't want to say it was 4 miles through snow. And if I missed the bus, that was actually true for me as well. But that's what they did here. And today you can drive and you can see kids playing in parks and doing all this stuff. It's like, that's how it used to be. And I don't think we do a good enough job about conveying the lifestyle that's here. When I say we don't convey that. And these opportunities exist, and probably more places than Little Falls. I will say that Little Falls is the best. So
I would say
the heck with all the rest of them,
yeah.
but they still have their opportunities, their lifestyle, their walkability, access to things, and I think maybe all of us up here don't do a good enough job about telling the downstate folks or out of state.
Well, I think you're doing a marvelous job, and I think it just takes time, right? And you're being persistent. I look at what's happened in the Hudson Valley just in the last couple of years, and little town, Hudson, New Paltz, Kingston, Gardner, where we live, and that walkability is so important, right? It's what people want. I mean, this vision of not having to get in your car to burn a gallon of gas to get a gallon of milk, right?
Yeah,
Going down to your corner store.
I hadn't heard that one before, but I like that. That's true.
And having the trail being right there. So I think it's being discovered. It's happening, and I'm convinced it's going. The influx is going to happen, and really one of the main messages we have at Parks and Trails for communities that are doing this work, marketing these opportunities, is to get ahead of it with your zoning, right? Understanding that, you want to make sure that as investment comes in, that you're steering it in the right ways so that your density is where it needs to be and you're conserving the open space as you can. Where I live in the Hudson Valley, there's a couple beautiful developments we like to call trail-oriented development, right? Where the zoning is in place so that you can cluster density near the trail at the right places, but so that the site plans and, as the development happens, you're preserving public access to the trail. The buildings, instead of turning their back on the trail, are inviting people in. There's a lovely mixed-use development just north of New Paltz called Zero Place. It's a beautiful LEED, platinum certified building, but it's got first floor coffee shop, bike parking, public restrooms. There's a little plaza right next door, and
Nice.
to see the mix of ages. There's retired folks. There's 20-something hipsters coming up from Brooklyn to experience it.
And we have a no hipsters sign coming into the city.
But it's a beautiful example of what future development along the trail should and could look like. And it's something that we want to see more of. So we're promulgating some model zoning so that communities can know, here's how you preserve access. Here's how you can convince people that this is where we might want to see a little more density. And people that are living and working in this development and developments like it are riding their bikes to work. They're walking on the trail. They're working. They're taking a break and just
Going out and taking a little ride.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the lifestyle that I think people are really craving today. So making that happen and hanging a shingle for developers and, talented, folks who might move there, anyone who might move there and making that, baked into your sort of value proposition, for folks who could come and discover it. So it's happening. And it's really a privilege to be a part of this movement that is really trying to integrate the natural world more into our daily lives. There's so many benefits, to that. And the community that you see too, I used to work a lot with Dutch and Danish designers as we were pedestrianizing Broadway and Manhattan and doing other stuff. And I was just fascinated, this sort of mix of anthropological and architectural perspective, where you're designing a place, you're designing a community to maximize eye contact, to maximize the impromptu meeting of strangers, right? And it's that kind of Jane Jacobs kind of a social interaction that the walkability is really all about. And you see it happening, right? And so I want to come back to Little Falls. I want to see the progress that you're making, and I want to turn people onto it because it is so inspiring.
You'll be gray hair. I did notice it because I want you to talk a little bit about the group of cyclists and what your intent was here and why you're here. But I noticed as they were walking, they were talking to people and saying hi.
Totally.
And they, ran into other people who were here, who were cyclists, who were walking through the city. And I think typical residents here don't realize how many people out there that are just walking around are coming off that trail and experiencing the city, right?
Yeah.
So your group, why did you guys get together and do this ride?
Partly it's donor engagement. Parks and Trails is a nonprofit, and we rely on the kindness and the generosity of our membership, who share our vision, who want to see our mission become successful. And that mission, of course, is continuing to improve and expand our natural spaces and making it a part of our everyday lives. And so part of it was just like telling these folks, many of whom are from New York City or from Buffalo, or from other places, just discovering how wonderful this is. And so it's part that. It's also partly informing this, this trail-oriented development vision and the zoning and the other land use policies that go along with it, because we have architects and urban designers along as well. It's kind of like
it's a really mixed group.
It's a mixed group. It like mixed use. You want a variety of perspective. And it's also just this interaction like we had last night over dinner, where we get inspired by the work you're doing, and you get to show off the awesome stuff and that sort of feedback loop of mutual sort of admiration that builds the community of people. And that's the coalition I was talking about. Yeah. So that was sort of the vision. And this is really the first time we've done something like this. We do these massive bike tours where we get 500, 600 people going from like Buffalo to Albany, and it's like a pack of locusts.
They descend here. There's about 600 of them in July that pop into Rotary Park down there, but they're passing through.
Exactly.
They're not experiencing.
Exactly. They're on a schedule. They're just like, and so having to come and even just spend a day here is really what it's all about. And I think that's the vision, right? As we're talking about the future of tourism, the future of people discovering the trail, is giving people enough enticement to linger, right? Like stay in Little Falls a couple days.
I have found that a lot of them don't have that. It's like, I'm on a schedule.
Yeah.
Like you said, I'm taking the train to Buffalo. I need to be in Albany by X, and that means I have to cover X number of miles per day, and I only have X number of minutes, and each opportunity where I stop to go to the bathroom and get a glass of water. And there's this pace, and it's like, okay, you may be enjoying the outdoors, but I doubt you're enjoying the ride as much as you could.
Yeah.
That's my criticism of some of the people who have passed through here, just talking to them on the trail.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I like this idea, especially the fact that you guys picked up the tab for dinner. That was really nice. Because I had told everybody that came from Little Falls, bring your checkbook, bring cash. I think that was a great experience last night. And I wish we had been able to have a bigger venue. Even we had 20 people there, but we could have had more, and it could have lasted a little longer. Did you go down to the convent afterwards with the group?
That was marvelous. That was like an unexpected treat, right? It was like the historic house tour, and you get to see the grand finale. You're like right up, what an amazing space.
I was hoping when you were walking down past City Hall, I had hoped that you guys would have stopped in the City Hall, then continued to walk East Main down past some of the homes there are just incredible, and then down, see the church, then gone to the convent there, Josie's place.
What a gem. I mean, Little Falls is a gem, but that is like another jewel in the crown here. And
she's done an amazing job.
I woke up this morning and I was thinking, did that happen? Was that a dream?
Josie's a great host. And she's in the city so much, she knows, not really how to treat people.
Oh, I want to go back and see that brickwork in her kitchen again, that herringbone brick floor. That was really
beautiful, isn't it?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So cool. So we're looking forward to doing it again. We'll bring another group of folks, maybe even a few more, and the secret's getting out, so
that's good.
We're happy to be a part of this community. And again, building the coalition statewide, we'd love to see, some of you in Albany. We have a beautiful, public lands lobby day that we do with Open Space Institute every February, where
Jeez, you want us in Albany in February? Come on. We can't get out of the snow here.
Well, it's the best time of the year to influence the state budget, right? And we try to time it perfectly so that as deliberations are happening, they're hearing from the right people saying, hey, this is what our community needs. This is what we've done with the previous investment, right? It's actually working. The DRI grant, for example, that y'all are doing so much with.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
There's a lot we want to do with it. It's a long process.
Yeah. But you need to go back and show progress, right, as you're asking for more.
Yep.
And we're actually going to be doing an event with Governor Hochul in Albany here pretty soon to celebrate some of what we won, in the budget, and to celebrate just the continuing improvement of our state park system, of the Empire State Trail, bringing more of those spurs and connections. I mean, now that the Empire State Trail is so much more cohesive and continuous, now the real task is like making those connections, because there's so many little towns, Amsterdam, Canada, Harry, others, where the trail is just a little bit outside of downtown, right? Yeah. So how do you really bring people, as we were discussing, off the trail, encourage them to go in and have that lunch?
I mean, we do, even though it's through the city here, technically, it's on the south side, and it's not the easiest thing to get that message across that there's a downtown here, that there's things to do. And so, we have ideas. Yeah. We have a little bit of money. The DRI, if some of those funds are freed from projects that are not moving forward, we intend to invest them in those kinds of things to make this happen. Because I forgot what our trail count was, but it was huge, the number of people. Dylan gave it to me. And
there's 4 million folks along the Empire State Trail every year. That's counting, the Canalway section and then the Hudson Valley section.
I think we had 40-something thousand through here. The counter wasn't working properly, but they've got it back in, and they're going to keep it. I said, we need it for a year because we want to count all those snowmobilers, whether you agree whether they should be there or not. There was a day that there was 1.5 miles of parked snowmobilers here during the winter. They were from Little Falls down to the Herkimer home.
Yeah.
How many people were there? How many hundreds that didn't get counted, right?
Yeah. So that's the Big Tent Coalition, because we love the snowmobilers too. Cross country skiers, equestrians. They're multi-use trails, right? Yeah. And we've got to be creating that space, for everyone that has a stake in the future of these spaces. And that's, again, bringing it back to our advocacy day in February. We have all of the tribes, from the public lands represented. And it's that chorus, that sort of symphony of voices that I think does move the governor, moves the legislature, because it can't just be a one-note band, right? You've got to have
I think you're right. It does.
Coalition.
Yeah. Well, it's been awesome having you here. I know you got to get back on that's why I looked at my watch. I was like, you're getting ready to head out. You're going to Utica next.
We're going to Utica. We're meeting again with another local mayor, and very lucky to have that common cause. And again, the group that we're with, discovering all this for the first time, they're going to go back and tell their friends, their colleagues, So I think we have a rising tide here, and just it's so inspiring to see the work you're doing here locally, Dave. So thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
And we'll be back.
All right, awesome. We'll see you again.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the Trailway Tales Podcast.